Wow, wow, wow. We've got incredible things to talk about today. Um, Obviously, many of you have obviously heard about the settlement, the National Association of Realtors settlement. It's not official, by the way. And I'm certainly, a little bit of a disclaimer, not going to be talking about specific commissions or advocating certain things like that. But we need to understand, and this is my heart is this: the public needs to understand what's going to be the impact either way. I think that's really what I want to talk about today is what's the impact. So we're going to talk about that today. Also going to talk about what's happening in the market right now, what's happening in the Villages market right now. So, well, let's start there, right? Let's start with what's happening in the Villages real estate market right now, because I think that's the thing that really that's what's most important, what's happening, and then we'll talk about the future, about what's going to happen with um, what's going to happen with commissions and structure of real estate and how that's going to be different. So the Village is actually last couple of weeks, about 10 to 14 days. There's been a little bit of a shift, and it seems like every couple of weeks this happens. Like we started off the year kind of sluggish, and then there was like a 6 week, really a ramp up period, and then we had like 3 weeks of like kind of slowing down in the kind of the latter part of February, beginning part of March. But the last couple of weeks of March, and I think it's because a lot of the snowbirds are, they're going to be heading back home. Some of these people want to buy something or put something under contract before they actually get back home. New listings, 35 new listings, and actually under contract, 57. That's a big margin. So we've seen over the last couple of weeks a little bit of a reduction in inventory, right? We've seen a little bit of a reduction in inventory, which means that if this continues, it would take a little bit for inventory to drop even further, but also prices could go up. But for the most part, we've seen a little bit of a reduction in pricing, especially in the homes that are very common, whether it's a Bougainvillea, Amarillo models, or courtyard villas, or patio homes, patio villas. Those are very common. So there's a lot more supply than demand. On the other homes, we're seeing a very much a plateauing and a stabilization. It'll be interesting to see what happens if the Fed reduces interest rates, but that's really not what we're going to talk about today. Today is about what you see here, the National Association of Realtors settlement. Is this going to be a good thing or a bad thing? And forget about realtors. Obviously I'm a realtor, I'm a broker, realty executives in the Villages community, located on 466. So I try to think about, is this going to be good for sellers? Is this going to be good for buyers? So let's look at what may happen. By the way, all of this is not even approved. There's a lot of noise about this. It's probably going to be approved by the court, but it hasn't been approved yet. So one thing I do want to show you is, let's take a look at the, let's see, I want to find the right slide for us. Here it is. So I want to show you basically what we're looking at as far as, what are the terms, the key terms of the agreement that you're noticing here, okay? So, obviously, release of liability, the lawsuit that many people were filing against real estate agents across the country never came against us, but it did come against NAR. So that would go away. Second thing is the compensation would be removed. Now, when you list a home, when we put it on MLS, the amount of money that the buyer's agent is going to be offered, which is all negotiable, by the way, and always has been. And once that's negotiated during the listing appointment or a listing contract time, the seller would agree to pay a listing agent X%, and then a portion of the proceeds would actually go to the buyer's agent. Okay. And that's what that compensation given to the buyer broker would be put onto MLS. So they would know, okay, when you sell this home, this is how much you would get paid. That would go away. Okay. Now, what that would be replaced by, there are a couple of, we're not going to get into what that could be replaced by, but it sounds like, actually we will, let's talk about it. What it could be replaced by is considering buyer brokerage commission a closing cost, a buyer closing cost. So essentially what the goal of all this is to make commission very transparent. What are buyers responsible for? What are sellers responsible for? Because there's always been, to be fair, there's always been this argument of like, who pays commission? Is it the seller or the buyer? I'd be interested to see what you think about, many of you have obviously bought and sold many homes. What do you think? Who do you think actually pays for commission in the current state that we're in for real estate? But all of this we're talking about mid-July, perhaps, where the compensation would be removed. And there might be another way to actually indicate what the compensation could be for the buyer broker. And we're going to talk about the pluses and minuses of that. Written agreement for MLS participants acting for buyers, obviously some kind of buyer brokerage agreement, some kind of agreement between buyer and buyer's agent. So essentially what we're looking at, those are the two biggies right there. Essentially how that impacts us. So let's look at those two things. So the buyer brokerage agreement basically would mean that we would be obligated. State of Florida is probably going to pass some laws, and there's some things and forms that are going to take place between here and July if everything is approved. The first thing that would happen is that if you were interested in looking at homes, you would have to decide whether you are going to work with a buyer's agent that's going to represent you, or go directly to the listing agent who may or may not, and probably will not, represent you in all likelihood. So that's a decision to make. And you may feel like on the surface, well, maybe I can save some money. That's a pro, right? There's possibility of saving some money. There's also the possibility of losing money because you could get worse of a deal because the listing agent's not representing you. So that could be a thing, it's something to consider. You could actually use the buyer commission towards a buyer closing cost of some sort. You could pocket it, but also you really don't know if you're getting a good deal or not. So there's a lot of value behind having a really good buyer's agent. And I admit, not every buyer's agent is good, but I will tell you that at Realty Executives, one of the things that we are doing is making sure that all buyers, and we're still working on this, all buyers are really, 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 really clear about everything that we're doing. Because in our industry, we've tended to actually keep things away from buyers. In other words, we disclose everything, except if there's a lot of drama on the other side, sellers providing a lot of drama, or they're getting upset, we may not tell the buyer, that the seller's getting upset. So that way not to mess up the deal. Because if someone says, oh, they said this, and they said this, and they said this, and they said this, that's the reason why you have brokers to actually cushion all of this and make sure that, things are running smoothly. Because if buyer and seller oftentimes talk to each other, it probably would mess up the deal. Happens a lot. But buyers are going to have that option. And I've always had that option, by the way. I've always had that option to do that. Except, now what's going to happen is that the buyer brokerage agreement will have to get signed in advance of looking at something. So that's going to be an extra form, which is, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but just an extra form. The other thing that is going to happen is that sellers will have the option of putting zero for a buyer brokerage compensation. Now, before, the rule was at least $1. Mostly there would be some percentage, whether it's 1%, 2%, 3%, 3.5% to the buyer brokerage. And we've seen varying commission rates for buyer brokerages. But now what we're starting to see is sellers, and we've seen a couple of these, and I don't think this is necessarily smart, but you do have the right to do this, not offer anything to the buyer brokerage, to the buyer broker. Well, you may think, well, I don't want to have to pay the buyer broker. I'm really paying my listing agent to do this. Well, the listing agent's really in charge of the marketing and looking for a buyer And part of that process of finding a buyer is actually offering it to many realtors or many other agents that may have access to buyers, not just a small pool of buyers that your listing agent would have. And I think that's the misunderstanding. I think a lot of people just don't understand. Like, you have buyers, just bring in the buyer. Well, you might have one or two buyers, but you're not going to have 50 buyers. And that's what offering to a larger group of people has done in the past. So the positive to actually maybe not paying a buyer broker is that on the surface you might be saving money, and perhaps that's you feel like that's going to be a great deal. And if you know everything there is to know about doing a real estate transaction, then I think you're going to be okay. However, if you don't know everything there is to know, and you do need some guidance, and you do need to know what the forms mean, and interpretation of how to negotiating tactics, whether a property is worth it or not, the comps, whether the home that you're offering is going to be worth it or not. Should there be a lower offer? Can we come up with a negotiating strategy? Can we negotiate price? Can we negotiate escrow terms? Can we negotiate, if you're doing financing terms, negotiating inspection period? Are you going to do an as is versus a standard contract? Are you going to negotiate length of inspection periods, closing dates? There's a lot of different things that buyer's agents do. So there is a lot of value. There is value there. And for many people, if you look at some of the reports, it's almost like there is no value. And I think, there are people that providing no value, I'm sure. But I think it's really important to look at, who you're working with. I would recommend this. Every person that if you're thinking about buying, especially in the villages or anywhere, by the way, because this is going to affect the whole country, is number one, make sure that you're working with someone that knows what they're doing. And that person should have some kind of buyer presentation. They should have a list of things that they're doing to actually help you win as a buyer. Same thing on the listing side. What's your plan? What's your strategy? Not just you've got a great smile, not because you know how to speak, not because you just work for a great company like Realty Executives. They should have a plan. What's the plan of action? And I think too often as buyers and sellers, we don't even care about the plan. It's like, I just want to buy this house. I don't want to be bothered. Well, that's part of the plan. So you don't have to be bothered. So this is a smooth transition. So be thinking about that. Now, one thing I think for some people, it might become less expensive for people to buy and sell a home. And the thing that we just don't know, and here's the how do you make this really tangible, is you can go into a situation and not pay commission. This is true, or pay less commission. The thing you don't know, and the home may sell, by the way. The thing that and maybe sell for the price that you want it to sell at. But the thing you don't know is if you pay a little bit more, and this is the rule of business, by the way. This is a rule of business. And it's not always this way, but I will tell you, this is a rule, especially when everything is equal. The more money you pay, you normally get better service. It's not guaranteed, but normally you will get better service. That's just kind of the rule. Like, I don't know about getting a great steak and some people might love this place. You might love Waffle House. With the steak at Waffle House is not going to be the same steak you're going to get at Ruth's Chris. And maybe you're okay with that. Maybe you're okay with the Waffle House steak. It's okay. Maybe you're okay with getting less service. Maybe you're okay with, I got what I got and that's okay. Or you may be okay with better service, smooth transition, smooth transaction, negotiating a very complicated marketplace, getting more money for your home when you sell it, or paying less for a home because a professional was there and they helped you navigate it. Not push you into anything, not sell you something, but help you really navigate the process very much like an attorney would a good attorney would in a courtroom. or a good doctor at his office or her office, or in surgery, or the dentist or the vet, right? Like it really does matter. So I think what's going to happen is it's very possible that for some people, it might be less expensive to sell their home after July. It's possible. And it's also very possible, I can see it both ways, where it becomes more expensive. And the thing you just don't know is you just don't know if it was more expensive or less expensive, because you're not going to be able to see both routes at the same time. You're going to see one route, you're going to choose one, and then, hopefully it works out. So be smart about it. Do your homework. I think that's really, really important. Is like, don't look at the news, but go straight to National Association of Realtors. So if you want to know about, okay, what is this whole ruling thing? What are we talking about? Go to NAR.com. It'll tell you the story. That's number one. Number two, I would talk to real estate professionals. And if you guys have questions, obviously you can call me 352-572-3796. I'm the broker owner at Realty Executives in the Villages, located on 466. 352-572-3796. And I also want to show you, let me show you one more thing. This is kind of interesting. I think this is another perspective. So do your homework for sure. Understand the differences. What are my options? I've told all of my people to connect with all of the people that they know. And that's going to take time. But to really, even for people that, maybe you're not even interested in buying or selling, but you just want to know what's going on. So I'm advocating for my people to educate all of our people, not whine, not complain, not point fingers or say this is the way this is or whatever. It's not an opinion thing. Just what are the facts? How does this impact me? Right. So I think that's a real thing. This was an article. Let me see if I can find this now. Let me backtrack here. So the article was, and I thought this was really good. This was actually in the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Here it is. Let's see. The author, Budge Husky. Okay, good. Okay, so this came out. I thought there were some really good arguments here. So where it says that, last week the announcement came out about the settlement agreement. And he's talking about, what are the truths, what are the myths? So one is the settlement forces brokers to reduce their compensation or commission. So that's not true, right? It just makes it negotiable, just like always. The only differences are buyer brokerage agreement with clarification to the buyer about what they're going to be responsible for. And I'd be really, like I said before, I'm curious about what you think. Do you think that buyers pay the commission or sellers pay the commission in the current state? The second thing is the settlement will, for the first time, allow sellers to no longer pay compensation for an agent bringing the buyer. And that's false, right? And I think you have to really think about this. Is anybody willing to work for free? So I think that's a real thing, and when you're offering less to people and when you're offering zero, can we really expect people to work for nothing and bring in a buyer? Let's be serious. So I think it very well could be more expensive, because buyer brokers, the good ones, may decide, I'm just going to work for more, and I'm no longer tied to what a listing agent is going to tie into my commission on MLS. And since it's not tied to it, they may decide, okay, this is what I work for, and I'm going to save you money. And by the way, if the seller is not going to offer buyer brokerage money, then that buyer broker may decide to talk to the buyer and say, they're not offering any compensation. We can get a price reduction, and we could also get my commission paid, and maybe we can get a little bit more. So there's obviously negotiating room. So for the sellers that are thinking, okay, this is a free lunch, now I don't have to pay the other side, you really don't, but you have to look at the pros and cons. So number 3 is the settlement prohibits sellers from paying a commission. A buyer's agent relieves sellers of financial burden. False, which is obviously correct. And the settlement will serve to meaningfully lower prices and make home ownership affordable again. I don't know. You look at, all right, let's say, commissions did go down by 2.5%, and we're talking about a $400,000 house. That's $10,000 less. If you take away, if that were to be the case, and I'm trying to play this through in my mind, and there's a $10,000 reduction, then are the buyers, what's going to happen, right? Like, okay, if you're eliminating one side, that means that it'll probably take longer to get your home sold because you're not having as much exposure, meaning you'll also probably not get as much exposure, means less offers perhaps, because less people are going to be showing the home because you're not offering anything on the other side. But at the same token, it's also an option to negotiate in the deal, the commission. I'm looking at this. I think all of it's going to be a wash. And what I could tell is just the conversations are going to be different. The path from A to Z is going to change, but you're still going from A to Z. So it's going to look a little bit different, more from a standpoint of negotiating something else. There's going to be another point in negotiating in the contract where there's many points now. There'll be one more, buyer agent commission. I think that's probably the punchline in all this. It's just going to be a little bit different. The conversation's going to be different. So if you have any questions, let me know. I know I ran long today. It's, we're March 25th. We're towards the end of season. It's going to be interesting how this impacts. Let's see what happens, impact wise, right? Whether it's going to impact, whether realtors are going to make less money, or is the public going to save money? Are buyers going to save money? Are sellers just going to pocket the money and make more money in their homes because they're paying less in commission? Or is nothing going to happen and it's just going to be a different conversation when we're negotiating the deal? So I think it's probably going to be more that than anything else. Just going a little bit different, more transparency. That's what I'm summarizing here. That's my summation. So hope everybody does well. By the way, I hope you had a great happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy Easter, by the way. Happy Easter is Easter week, Holy Week. And I hope everybody stays safe, enjoy your families, and we'll talk soon.